Coders, hello. Ready for step 37. In this version of the code, we're going to add something to the way the player dies. And I'm first going to show you what it looks like, as we're used to. So in the previous versions of the code, if the player touched an enemy and died, you would get a get ready text, and you'd have to press enter, and then you would start like you just saw. Basically, now this happens. See, so we're hit. We don't get the get ready text anymore, but we just float up for a while. The player has a moment to recuperate, and so that's basically a death animation. To try to shoot this spider. Oh, and he killed me. See? So that's what we're going to be putting in. It's a little bit different from adding the death animation to the spider. In the previous version of the code, we had a routine called dead control, which did what I just said. So put the get ready text and checking for a button press. That code is gone. We do have a new sprite. As you can see, it looks a little different here. I just picked the wrong colors, but this is just one sprite of the player on his back floating upwards. But no sprite animation. So we do the usual again. We add. Let's see. Where is it? What is it? Basically, we just add the sprite player dead. That's all we have to do. If we go past the the multiple of 4 number of sprites, then we have to update this value, number of sprites div 4, but we don't have to do that. We're at 51 sprites at the moment. Not going to show you the minor changes. As some changes to the code that add constants so that we don't have to use register addresses. Dead control, the function has been removed. There is one of the things that we do when the player gets hit, we have to indicate that he's still there as an active object, but he is in dead mode. So what we've, and that's kind of a new state, but what we also do is still check for collisions. When the player dies, the spiders are still trying to get me. So we have to find some way of trying to not check for collisions with the dead player. So I'll get the outline back. Outline. And we go for check collisions. Where are we? Check collisions. Okay. Well. So this is the check collisions code. What's changed here, if we check an object, this bit of code has been added. What we're going to try to do is when the player gets hit, we give the sprite state a value of 129. And what we also have to do now is to prevent us from checking anything that is not an enemy when we check for collisions. So we have the type here. This over here we get the sprite type, which is in this case the player, and we transfer the player type to Y, and we use Y as an index into the is type enemy, yes or no. If it is not an enemy, then this just loops back to there to check the next one. Right, so this way we only check enemy objects, so we prevent checking the dead, basically the corpse, for collisions. Because that's going to introduce all kinds of weird bugs and problems that are hard to find. So we've done that. And when the player collides with an enemy, the code is right below here. Parameter 6, you'll have to believe me, at this moment is the sprite number. We load the accumulator with 129, and we store the sprite state to that. We know this. This is the player number, which is always 0. So we could make this shorter by not doing this. Oh, sorry, not doing this, and we could do this. But we're not doing that. And we're doing this. So when the player is dead, all we have to do is put this value in, make the sprite state of the player 129, and then change the sprite and set its move position to 0. Because we're gonna be moving the sprite when he's dead. We just set, this is just a counter, and we set it to 0. Now, what we have to do is when the player is dying, we have to do something. Now we're gonna put that code in player control. It used to be a separate dead control, but now we have the code in player control. Now, if you watch closely, then the player control zone used to start with the player control function, which is just a label basically called player control. The reason this player control code, which is basically the entry code, is now moved here. Now that looks a bit weird, but this has to do with branching. When you branch in 6510 or 6502 assembly, you can only jump 128 bytes forward and 127 bytes back. Now this code has become too large to do that if we don't take action. Now there's several ways you could solve that. You could branch to a nearby location and jump to something from there. But the thing chosen here is to just rearrange the code a little so that the entry code for this function is below where the zone starts up there. So, but basically what we're doing, the first thing a player control now does is to check the sprite state. If it is 129, then we are dying. Otherwise, we are not dying. And if we're dying, then we're going to player is dying, and player is dying is right at the top of this code. So what do? We increase the sprite move position counter. We load it. If it's not 64, then we do what we want to do. If it is 64, then we do a player respawn. So this gives us 64 frames of time for the player basically to recuperate from his death, and for us to move the body in the direction of the heavens. So remember that this code is being called on every frame. So on every frame, we just move this counter up. If it's 64, we do a player respawn. If it's not, then what we do is we take this counter, we make sure that we look only at the least significant 3 bits, and If that is not 0, then we do no up move. If it is, if this rotates around, basically this sets the speed at which the body moves up. If we, in other cases, we have like an animation delay. In this case, we just do it like this. We look at the same counter, but we just chop off the most significant bits and check for 0. No up move is just ready, and otherwise we just do a move sprite up. It's basically very simple, but we have to have a bit of a delay and some time to move the thing up. So that's that. Then player respawn is basically what we did before. We decrease the number of lives. We display a number of lives on the screen. We load it. If it's not 0, if it's not 0, then we do restart player. Otherwise, the check for high score is basically game over, so end of the game. And restart player is this. This command doesn't do anything. It's just a leftover. Doesn't mean anything. What we do is we give the player, when he restarts, a full set of bullets. So what that means is that we have to color them the filled color. So colors 2 and 7 are the ones that, when you actually have the bullets, they get this color. So we just paint them in the color RAM. We have to do that for every bullet. So you can see that Y is an index in this location. This is just a screen color plus the 23 lines times the 40 columns, and then we start at position 19, and then we walk to the right. We compare it with the number of shells that the player has access to. If it's not there yet, then we refill the shell image, but then the next one. So this is just a little loop. And then at the end, after we've colored them in, we load again the number of shells that the player actually has and or can have, and then we give him that. So he has a full set. We then have to set the player back to the position where he was, because we've now floated the sprite up and we have to put him back. So we didn't change his X and Y position. So we take the X and the Y, we put them in parameter 1 and parameter 2, and then we call this beautiful function, calculate sprite position from character position, and we actually put him there. Then we load the bit value, because we want to make sure that the sprite is enabled. So we enable that particular sprite and store this value back into the VIC sprite enable register, so that we're sure that it's actually on screen. Then we set the player sprite back to its original shape. And that is a right pointing shape. So we put that in there for the player, which is the first element in this array. Then we set the fast reload and the invincibility and the sprite state back to 0. Remember, because this was still 129. So now we're no longer dying. We set the sprite direction to the right. We set the jump position and the falling position to 0, and we are done. All right, so this is this doesn't say the get ready thing. It just resets some stuff, and then it says, okay, we're done. And that is it. That is everything. That is everything. Okay. So that's it. We're on to step 38. I think step 39 was music and sound. But we'll see. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.